All right, well, welcome to this panel, Indigenous Knowledge, Wisdom, and Resilience, Perspectives from Wisconsin's Native Nations. Our moderator is Danielle Yancey, Director of the Native American Center for Health Professions at the School of Medicine and Public Health. Danielle is Menominee and also Sante Sioux. She has worked in public service for nearly 20 years, focusing on programs that promote social justice, education, access, and equity. The mission of the Native American Center for Health Professionals is to improve the recruitment, retention, and graduation rates of Native American health professionals, students, and to promote health education, research, and community academic partnerships with tribal communities. Ms. Yancey is an alumna of the UW-Madison with undergraduate degrees in women's studies and social welfare and a master's of science in urban and regional planning. She holds a sustainability leadership graduate certificate from Edgewood College. So Danielle, I'll let you lead your panel. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Poso ane mawaniwiak mashiknatanawe makanak. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to greet and welcome you all in my language, which is Menominee. I, like was mentioned in the earlier session, I'm very early to learning my language, but it's a very important part of how we introduce ourselves. Like was mentioned, I come from the and Santee Dakota Sioux people, and I'm Bear Clan. It's my tremendous honor to welcome you all to today's session. Thank you, Dr. Pats, for that introduction, and to the Global Health Institute for inviting our center to co-sponsor this year's Global Health Symposium on this very important theme of fostering resilience through Indigenous wisdom and scientific knowledge. I also wanted to take a moment to thank you, Dr. Paz, for this morning's acknowledgement that our university sits on Ho-Chunk lands. And I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am joining you all from Dejope, the homelands of the Ho-Chunk Nation and what is now known as Madison, Wisconsin. I also want to acknowledge our additional Native nations and neighbors who call Wisconsin home today. We think this is really important for us to acknowledge our past and its impacts are important for us to learn about and understand as we all work towards health parity and well-being for all. So we are extremely lucky to have some incredible panelists with us for today's session, which again is titled Indigenous Knowledge, Wisdom, and Resilience, Perspectives from Wisconsin's Native Nations. So this session will explore the intersection of traditional practices that advance well-being and academic research, education, and outreach projects that promote health. Our center has a commitment to enhancing the visibility of the powerful work that is happening across the state within our tribal communities to improve health and well-being. And so it's really our honor to have these wonderful panelists with us today to share the important work that they are doing. So today we have joining us Mr. Gary B. Saw, who is the director of the Menominee Tribal Department of Agriculture and Food Systems and former chairman of the Menominee Nation. We also have Ms. Whitney Schreiber, who is a diabetes nurse educator with the Stockbridge-Muncie Health and Wellness Center, and Dr. Rebecca Webster, assistant professor of American Indian Studies with the University of Minnesota Duluth. Just a quick housekeeping. The panel format for today will include a 15-minute presentation from each of our panelists, who will highlight the amazing work that they are doing. You are welcome to use the chat to share comments and post questions, and I will help field those to our panelists at the end. So without further ado, I'm excited to jump right into our first presenter. First off, we will have Mr. Gary B. Saw, who is of the Menominee Bear Clan. And like I mentioned earlier, is the director of the Menominee Tribal Department of Agriculture and Food Systems and the Menominee Tribal Food Distribution Department. He has served 15 years on the Menominee Tribal Legislature, twice serving as tribal chairman and also serving as vice chairman and secretary. He has served Native American K-12 education as superintendent, administrator, vice principal, curriculum coordinator, art instructor, and as a tribal college dean of student services. He holds a Master of Science in Education Administration from UW-Madison and attended Harvard Summer Educational Leadership and earned a Bachelor of Science in K-12 Art Education from UW-Stout. Mr. Visa's journey has led him to recognize the need to reestablish a culturally informed, sustainable Indigenous food system to improve tribal member health, heal the environment, and revitalize the local economy. So personally, I just want to say a Wawani Katanen to Mr. Visa for joining us today and for your leadership and advocacy and all that you do for our community. So without further ado, I turn it on over to you.
Okay, back to Wawani and Danielle. Po na tanwe makana Gary Bisa and the Aswisian. Os palace mamachita na takan na toto manua yellow owasa nakatman which kikutim. So what I had said in our language is how I am told I must introduce myself and let people know that perspective I come from. I am Bear Clan from the Menominee Nation, and that is one of the principal clans of our tribe. I am also given the name Oscar Palace, and that's like a messenger or translator. And the Bear Clan actually is a speaker and keeper of the law. So you can see where I felt some of my civic responsibilities fell within my clan system. So first of all, I have no PowerPoint I'm showing, and I'll tell you why. In our thinking, if we look at taking all of our knowledge and those values and the morals and everything associated, and we put them in a book or we put them on a video and we collect them, then there is no need to go see that elder anymore. Some people will say, well, I'll get that knowledge from the book, but the book doesn't put it in context what really is happening, and it can't relay the ethical and moral needs that you need to get by relating to that individual. So you'll see many natives, well, we don't want to, if we can get away with it, we will not put our elders in elderly centers if we can keep them ourselves. They're an important part of our world. And we saw that decimated by having that great value of wanting to keep your elders with you. We saw how that got hurt in this COVID pandemic. So even something as positive as wanting to keep and share that knowledge and that understanding of the patterns of the world, how that can come back and hurt us. So it was one of our lessons. So long story short, that's why I'm not showing a PowerPoint, because I believe what the elders say, and that it comes through stories and it comes from hearing those individuals. This part I'm saying is going to be fine to speak though. So as Menominee Nation, we call ourselves Kayas Mamachatawak, and that means the ancient ones, or as it said, the ancient movers, because we lived we don't have a creation story. I mean, a migration story. We've always been here, and we've moved from camp to camp and from food source to food source, following the seasons, sustainably doing that, whether it was ricing camp, spearing camps, maple syrup camps, gardening camps, hunting camps, berry picking camps. We had all of those types of things, and we moved all across over 12 million acres of land that we knew we had a responsibility to all of those animals and all of those plants there to just be sustainable on that. So when the French fur traders come and when the Ojibwe followed their migration path across from the East Coast, both of them called us Menominee, and that's people of the wild rice, because they saw predominantly wild rice was such a big part of our diets. And it was said, wherever Menominee go, that's, the wild rice will follow. So we entered into a bunch of treaties, and in 1854, we ended up with this land we now have, which is approximately 250,000 acres of forest. And in the span of the last 100, 150 years, we've gone from what the French fur traders had first acknowledged when they saw us was this very healthy, very keenly sharp and witted and very witty sense of people that really understood the land and lived well, very healthy, to this reservation, this Menominee community, where right now, out of the Wisconsin county's health reports, Menominee County, which is coterminous with the Menominee Reservation for the most part, has the highest predominance of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And someone might ask why, but when we signed the treaties, part of that was that we would receive several things in compensation for basically most of a large section of the state of Wisconsin. So one of those things that we received and continue to receive are from the USDA, and that's the food commodities. And what we found out after we were people of poverty, we found out that our diets drastically changed. And we ended up eating foods that were highly processed, foods that had a lot of sugar content in them, foods that our systems were not used to and were not healthy types of foods. And we lived that way for a long time, and we bought into the McDonald's and the Hardee's and that whole wonderful image of how things were great and how things were going to be. Well, it wasn't. We understood that we had such high levels that we needed to look at how we can improve our health, how we can get back to what them old people had when they had that vibrant, healthy economy, that great health, the life expectancy that greatly expanded what we have now. And we knew that a large connection to that was the food. And we knew not only the food itself, but gathering the food and the exercise of planting and of getting out and reconnecting and making sure you stayed connected with the environment and with nature. And luckily, we have individuals that had not forgotten that, and we're bringing those individuals back in to help reteach those of us, those Menominee that had forgotten how to grow vegetables, how to really gather raw, unprocessed foods and good foods. So we made that move, and in 2018, the Menominee tribe said, we think this is such a big problem that one of the things we want to do is establish a Department of Agriculture and Food Systems to see if we can reestablish our own tribal food system and really look at an indigenous food network where we know other tribes that also believe that same way could also partake in. So we've looked at that. We also know that within our tribal economy, we work towards sustainable economies, and we push now to find those types of things. We have a lumber mill here that we have, and now we're hoping it's just coming back in after this terrible pandemic. But we have a lumber mill that has been the model in the almost in the world, surely in the United States and in North America, a model of sustainability and in forest management. And we've looked at understanding that that was the right way to do it. And we are looking at other industries then that also are sustainable and green, because in our understanding, it's not just the person and it's not just right now that needs to be healthy, but we know that the environment needs to be healthy. And all of those elements, all of those relatives of ours need to be healthy. Everything has to happen all together. So we have to find a way to not overreach. We have to negotiate with our environment to take what we need, but also to understand we need to protect and take care of that environment for our babies and those that come after us. So we've been working for 2.5 years now. We're almost 3 years where we've gotten to the point now where we're starting to build that type of food chain, food supply production chain. We know the elements of it, and we're trying to build indigenous producers. One of the things the pandemic showed us was we have no true control over our food supply. And if we call ourselves a sovereign dependent nation, and that's what the Supreme Court has indeed called us, that sovereign dependent nation within a domestic dependent nation within the United States. We can't call ourselves sovereign, though, unless we truly have that ability to feed ourselves. During this pandemic, and no knock to the foods that we had received, we received foods indeed that kept us going, and we're thankful for that. But many of our elders have food sources that they need and they want, and are, for instance, lactose intolerant. So we're creating those types of foods that for sure are non-GMO, use minimal or no pesticides, and minimally processed. We're in that process of that development, and we know that we can make this. There are many communities out there. So I'm anxious to hear what some of Whitney and others talk about regarding the great movements that Oneida and Stockbridge Munsee have made also, because this is where we are going. And not only us, but we see smaller non-native communities that we know are taking that same organic push and making that same movement. So I thank you, and I believe my time is up. But thank you, and I'd love to hear the remainder of the speakers and learn myself on what great actions they've done. Thank you, Danielle.
Wawen, and thank you so much for sharing more background about the work that you've been doing and the importance of food and those teachings and how to revitalize our traditional foods in our community. Food is truly medicine. Well, next, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next panelist, Ms. Whitney Schreiber. Ms. Schreiber is a diabetes nurse educator. She was raised on the Stockbridge-Munsee Reservation in Bowler, Wisconsin, and is a member of the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans. Ms. Schreiber graduated from Bowler High School in 2006 and earned her bachelor's degree in nursing from UW-Eau Claire in 2011. While in nursing school, she participated in an honors program which allowed her to focus on Native American health. She worked for a year at St. Vincent Hospital in Green Bay before moving home to work for her community. Ms. Schreiber has worked as a diabetes nurse educator at the Stockbridge-Munsee Health and Wellness Center for the past 9 years. So it's my pleasure to now turn it on over to Ms. Schreiber.
Whitney Schreiber and Dinawethe. Maekanu Sekwanek Noam. And I'm new to our language too. My tribe's language is, well, there's two of them, but that was the Mohican language. And I said, "Are you well, friends? I see you survived the night," which is our traditional greeting. So you can definitely tell what a different time period that came from. My name is Whitney Miller Schreiber, and I'm from the Mohican Nation. Like Danielle said, I'm a registered nurse and a certified diabetes educator for my tribe and our tribal clinic, the Stockbridge-Munsee Health and Wellness Center. This picture comes from our Many Trails Park, which is where our polo grounds are. So a little bit more about the community. We're located in pretty central Wisconsin. We border the Menominee Reservation. We have about 830 people that live on or near the reservation, and about 1,500 utilize our tribal clinic. So our clinic is open to everyone. We're the largest employer of Shawano County with our casino being here, so we do see a number of employees. So our diabetes program that I help manage, we have about 300 people with diabetes. Back in 2008, we had 186 people that were diagnosed with diabetes. And then our numbers kind of kept jumping pretty quickly from there, going up like 20 to 30 people every year. But then right around 2014, we started to level off. So really between 2014 and now, we've stayed between 290 and 300 people with diabetes. And we noticed that phenomenon, it wasn't just specific to Stockbridge. We were funded by this program called the Special Diabetes Program for Indians, which is across the nation, and a lot of tribes receive that for funding, to put on different activities for preventing and dealing and managing diabetes. And in the SDPI 2020 report to Congress, they noticed that diabetes prevalence rates were actually starting to decrease in American Indian and Alaska Natives. So from 2013, there were 15.4% of Natives having diabetes type 2. And in 2017, it actually came down to 14.6. And what's interesting about that is neither the US general population nor any other US racial or ethnic group had a decrease in prevalence. They also found that diabetes-related mortality had also decreased. So it wasn't necessarily that the improvement in prevalence was driven by a reduction in new cases of diabetes in Alaska Native and American Indian adults. So, it's hard to pinpoint like a cause and effect. I can't necessarily say that, it's always a good thing to have the numbers go down, because you do want to be capturing people with diabetes, and, a lot of people do go undiagnosed. So, but I do think overall in Indian country, we are doing well screening people and capturing those people that have type 2 diabetes. And I do think the work that's happening across Indian country is making a difference. So the definition of health from the World Health Organization is that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And then this little concept map I really like. It came from the Bemidji Area Health Promotion Program, but it talks about the 7 circles of health and well-being, and food, and being in motion, and sleep, balance, relationships, culture, traditions, and awareness. They all play such an important part in the overall health and well-being of a person. So in my role, I split time between our medical department, where I see patients, and I'm also in our community health department, where we're having community events throughout the year. The pandemic definitely has affected that. We've had to really change how we can offer things to the community, but we're putting on a lot of events every month, and I'll get into those. But I'm really thankful to work in a small community where we work closely with like our agriculture department, and the agriculture department really has taken off in the last few years to, like Gary was saying, growing more of our own foods, and especially traditional foods, and talking about our traditions and passing on that knowledge to other people, so that it can improve our health. So we work with people across the lifespan. We work with babies and kids. We do like a diabetes kids camp in the summer normally, and we do some cooking classes, and we have an elder meal site. So we go over there and do education with the elders throughout the year as well. So I will say, like, I'm not necessarily an expert in any of these areas, but I do have some personal knowledge, and I've really enjoyed my role as a diabetes nurse educator, to be able to bring in people that have more knowledge to share it with our community. So today I'm going to specifically talk about some of the events that we're doing, and especially related to incorporating more culture and traditions, because it is so important in so many ways. So some physical activity events that we do throughout the year, at least once a month, we were having a physical activity event, and then weekly we were having some series. Like in the winter, we have a snowshoeing series. So we have some trails here at our clinic that we have people come and use, and we go ahead and break the trails ahead of time and mark them really well. We've done some night hikes, which are really fun. We do a lacrosse series. So with lacrosse, we did have somebody come in and talk about like how that game came to us, and how it was traditionally played, amongst the men in the community, and women had a different game called chaha. We have not, unfortunately, been making our own lacrosse sticks, but I do have some here today that in the past, like many years ago, this was actually my dad's. So back in the 70s, our tribe was making our own sticks and playing with them. And we have had some people bring these back and play. But that is a big goal of mine, to actually get back into making our own again. We've done some kayaking events, just on a lake. We haven't gotten too crazy or anything. And we do some nature and medicine walks, where we will have community members with knowledge come, and we'll forage for some foods, look for some medicines. And we have been playing other traditional games too. Like we've had some other people from like Oneida come over and teach us some games, and we'll play together. So in the picture here, well, obviously there's the kayaking and the snowshoeing, and then that game that those group of guys are playing, that's actually a traditional game that we played called long ball, where it's similar to baseball. You can see that guy has a stick and somebody's pitching the ball to him, but a little bit different because you can actually hit the ball any direction. So I'm talking about traditional foods. We will bring in speakers that have knowledge of this and, you know, host educational luncheons. Like I was saying, sometimes we'll forage for the foods together, then bring them in and cook them together. We've done some taste testing events, which are kind of fun, where we'll make up a few different foods and put them in smaller little samples so everybody can get a taste of them, and usually do some sort of rating system. Our agriculture department, they've been doing some gardening workshops, and we have a few gardens throughout the reservation. One is specifically our Three Sisters garden, where we grow some of our ancestral corns, beans, and you can see here, like in that picture, that's a blue corn. Our tribe actually originated from east, like what's now like Massachusetts area. And we've been fortunate to be able to get some of those seeds back from what was grown over there. We've been trying to have more traditional foods at events as well. So even if that's not what the event is about, you know, we've still been like having food catered, or not catered in, but have food brought in that was traditionally made. Our tribe also has a CSA program that they've ran for the last, I believe it's going on year 4. And that has been a great program. Sorry if I didn't say, the CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture, where somebody does buy in and the agriculture department grows the food for them. And then each week they get to pick up a box of produce. And there's not necessarily traditional foods grown in that, but it's just another way of getting healthy foods out into the community. And we're happy to say that that is growing in popularity. You can see in the pictures there, those are some morel mushrooms that that were found foraging, and maple syrup is very common here on the reservation too. That's we're just coming off of syrup season. And then talking a little bit about traditional medicines. I've been fortunate to, or I've been honored to work alongside Misty Cook is her name. She's a lady in the community that has been working with the medicines for a long time, and it's been passed down to her from, you know, her family. And I share the same family too, actually. But Misty will come in and do some luncheons with us. We'll go on the medicine walks with her and put down our tobacco and collect some medicines. Some commonly used ones in our tribe, you know, especially in my role as a diabetes nurse, you know, for diabetes, our tribe uses red raspberry leaf and make a tea out of that. In February for like American Heart Month, you know, then we're looking at ways to, you know, reduce stress and blood pressure, things like that. So then we often talk more about stress and or teas for stress and anxiety, and like chamomile is very commonly found all over, especially around here, around the clinic here. But I would say the most commonly used medication or traditional medicine in our tribe is what we call number 6 or wild bergamot. And that's good for colds, flus, pneumonia, fever, chills, things like that. So just lastly, some links here. So like those numbers that I brought up at the beginning about like the prevalence rates, those can all be found on the Indian Health Service Division of Diabetes Treatment and Prevention website. And then our tribe has this an agriculture website you can go to, mohicanegg.com. And then lastly, just a plug for the We Are Healers organization, which is meant to try to recruit more natives into medicine or healthcare professionals. And you can go and look at some videos there. They did one on me about 5 years ago. So if you're interested more in what my role is at the clinic, you can find it there. But thanks for having me. Thanks for all the work you all do as well.
Wonderful. Well, Wannon, thank you so much, Whitney, for sharing the amazing work that's happening in your community. I think such a great segue in building upon the previous presentation about the importance of food systems and how you've integrated that into your approaches and care for those in your community. I think also is a great tie-in with some words at today's introduction with Professor McGinnis about how can we integrate Western and traditional medicine in the way that we care for the members of our community. So very beautiful to see the awesome work that you're doing in your community, Wawanin. So next up, real quick, I just wanted to draw your attention to the chat where we are posting and sharing some resources. And I do encourage you to watch Whitney's video. It is amazing, her story and the work that she's doing in the Stockbridge-Muncie community. So next up, it's my great pleasure to introduce our final panelist who will talk more about preserving and protecting our traditional foods. Next, we have Dr. Rebecca Webster, who is an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin. She's an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota Duluth in the American Indian Studies Department. She teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in the Tribal Administration and Governance programs. Prior to joining UMD, she served the Oneida Nation as an attorney for 13 years. In addition to her academic interests, she grows heirloom traditional foods with her family on their 10-acre farmstead, Ukwakhwa, which means our foods where we plant things, and with Ohelagu, which means among the corn stalks, a co-op of Oneida families that grow Iroquois white corn. And thank you, Dr. Cornelius, for helping me pronounce those words in the very beautiful Oneida language. So it's my pleasure to now turn it on over to you.
All right. All right, so Goli Swagwake, Kanyeta Gelu Niyungyat, Sungwe Huene, Becky Webster Niyungyats Otslunige, Wagwahoni Wagit to load, Oniote Aga, Niwaguru Huanjot, Delunkawane, Neat Wagenyu. So in English, what I just said is, hello, everybody. My name is Ganyet Dege, which means snow scattered here and there, trying to protect the land. My English name is Becky Webster. I am Wolf Clan, I'm Oneida, and I grew up near Duck Creek that runs through the Oneida Reservation. So this here is a picture in early fall last year of one of our three sisters' garden plots. So today I'm going to be talking about saving seeds and how that's so important to share those seeds with our community so we can regain those connections to our foods and help those seeds fulfill their responsibilities to us. So I'm an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota Duluth, focusing a lot on tribal government issues, but also recently starting to shift some of my focus over to the food sovereignty movement, which is, it's just a really exciting moment in time to be able to celebrate our foods again and be able to share in that excitement of the food movement throughout Indian country. I'm also one of the founding members of Ohelagu, which is a co-op of about 10 Oneida families that grow our traditional heirloom corn together. We grow about 6 acres together. We plant it, we weed it, and we harvest it all together. And also, of course, we eat it together too. So that's been a really amazing experience. And on our farmstead, a few years ago, my husband and I purchased 10 acres of land on the Oneida Reservation. And we explained to a faith keeper what we envisioned for this property, and he gave us the name Ukwakhwa, Niyukwayayathoslu. It means our foods, where we plant things. So I'll be going into a little bit more about that later as well. So the way we start things is we talk about the creation story, because that's where it really all began. So near the beginning of the creation story, we say, and so it is, they say, Sky Woman brought seeds from the sky world. So this is a beautiful artistic rendition from a friend of mine, Yunda Douglas, our Jessica Paulus, and she is, oh, there's a typo in my slide. She's an artist here in the Oneida community, and I'm just really excited to be able to share this in particular because it shows a pivotal moment in our creation story when Sky Woman, who is pregnant with child, is coming from the sky world down to the earth, and with her, she's bringing seeds with her. So those seeds will become activated as time moves on in the story, and those seeds will have a responsibility to sustain our minds and our bodies. And we will likewise have a reciprocal responsibility to care for those seeds. So we've gone through quite a bit of history. Like the Stockbridge Munsee, we also were originally from out east. We are from what's originally New York. And when the early explorers first came and encountered us, they waxed poetic about us in their journals. They talked about our amazing agricultural accomplishments, and they said they had so much food stored for years worth of food. And we did this on purpose because if something happened in our community or a neighboring community, that we would be able to help them out and we wouldn't need to be worried about that. So quickly, right after the explorers came through, came the military officers who targeted oftentimes our food sources instead of targeting the indigenous people. And there's all kinds of terrible stories about those military expeditions, a decade after decade after decade of attacking our food sources. The worst culminating, of course, when General John Sullivan came through at Washington's command and burned just thousands of acres of our corn, chopped down orchards and burned homes. So that was during the Revolutionary War. Right after that, the Oneida people were essentially almost landless in what was then New York through a series of illegal treaties and some scrupulous land deals. There was a heavy influence from alcoholism, and we felt we had no other choice than to follow the federal government's command to remove us to what is now Wisconsin. So we came here in Wisconsin, everything was great for a while. As soon as we landed in our new homeland that we had negotiated with the Menominee and the Ho-Chunk to be able to stay here, we began to farm again. And everything was great for a while. We had our reservation established here in 1838. But then in 1877, Congress passed the General Allotment Act, which removed title from the tribe as a community and gave ownership to individual tribal members. After a period of time, the tribal member would be able to sell it. It became taxable and they could mortgage it. Well, as was common throughout the United States, we ended up losing a lot of our ownership. Oneida got hit a little bit harder than the rest of the country. Within a single generation, we lost about 95% of our land. So it was extremely difficult to carry on an agricultural way of life when 95% of your land is gone in that single generation. So soon after Congress passed the Indian Reorganization Act, we began to reacquire our land. So the reason I'm telling you this is that we have a lot of historical trauma in our communities. It has ebbed and flowed, with the removal of our children to boarding schools. There's been a lot of severing of or attempted severing of our relationship with our language, our culture, and our foods. Thankfully, there have been enough people within our communities that have held on to that they're able to share it with us. And our food has remained an important part of our identity throughout that entire time period. And as I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, currently we are in a revival. And I like this saying, it's a good day to be Indigenous, because it really is. Here's a picture of last year's harvest from our farmstead, where we have the different varieties of corn, beans, and squash, also some tobacco and sunflowers in there. So when we talk about growing the three sisters together, we recognize that they have roles and responsibilities to each other. And this is, I think, a picture from maybe late July of last year. And we see the corn growing tall and strong. It's serving as a support for the beans to crawl up her stalks. The beans provide nitrogen to the soil, and then the squash is all around the bottom of the plant. And I think the squash is really underrated because she has a lot of jobs to do. She covers the ground, keeping the moisture in the soil and keeping the weeds and the animals out. So she protects all of the foods that are inside of there. So these three plants working together, I think it's interesting that there's been a movement about polycropping and all of these different scientific terms and recognizing the benefits, when these are actually part of our original instructions on how we should be doing things, and it makes sense. I like to look back at these things and think, dang, our ancestors, they were geniuses. They really had things figured out. And here we are doing our very best to try to relearn that. So just a little note about the pollination differences between the crops that are in the Three Sisters garden. We have the corn over here on the left. Those are the tassels at the top, and that's where the corn pollen is. And the wind will carry that corn pollen and to land on the silks of the corn. And each little bitty silk is tied down to what will later become a kernel of corn once it's pollinated. And so that wind can carry for potentially miles. And that's what kind of makes it scary when we plant our fields next to so many different GMO corn or hybrid corns that are out there. So we need to really be careful when we're selecting for seed to make sure that that didn't happen. At the bottom picture in the middle and the bottom picture on the right, that's our squash. So they are pollinated by bees and insects. So you can see the little busy bee in that male flower over there, and he's later going to go over to the female flower. And you can really tell the difference between these because the female has like a baby bump already started underneath the flower. And in this particular variety, it's very prominent. And that will later become the squash itself right there. And on the right-hand side, that's our bean flowers. So beans are supposed to be self-pollinating, but sometimes you can get an overly anxious bee that will go in there and pierce the inside of the flower and carry some pollen over to another bean and then get cross-pollinated. So the reasons that I talk about these is because we are worried about cross-pollination. So some of the things that we can do is we can hand pollinate, but that's not something necessarily that we want to do here because we're still learning about our foods. So there's a lot that we don't quite understand. We did try to hand pollinate one time a few years ago, and it didn't turn out as great. So we're just trying to take precautions to let nature just handle the rest at this point in time. Again, the GMO concerns. So when we go to select for our corn and our beans and our squash, we look for signs that it has been cross-pollinated. And if it has, we'll just go ahead and eat those foods. We won't necessarily save the seeds from them. So sometimes you can get new varieties that are out there. So this is a picture of a cob of corn that grew from actually a smaller black sweet corn, which has shriveled kernels and it's much shorter than this one. So we know that something happened along the line in there. But as with a lot of things, we're not necessarily interested in the scientific explanation of things. We like to think that all of the corn is related. So this particular cob here, she's remembering her relatives. So we're taking this cob and we may potentially plant her and a couple others that showed up just like her and just see what happens. So here's some seed saving tips. So when we gather our seeds in the fall, these are some of the things that we do to be able to make sure that when we share them with other people, that they know what they're getting. So the first one is we look for the best characteristics in the plants, in the foods, and the seeds. So like for the corn, we'll go through before we're even ready to harvest to see, you know, where is the cob on the stalk? What does the husks look like? And then we'll pick all of those. And then once we peel back the husks, we look to see, make sure, like for our varieties, most of them have 8 straight rows. We look for a consistent coloring if that's what the variety is supposed to have. And if it's like a flower corn, we make sure it doesn't have dents or dimples, because if any of these things are different, that's possibly a sign that it was cross-pollinated with a GMO corn, and we will not save those seeds. Another thing is make sure that the fruits are fully mature before harvesting. And this is something I have a little bit of a hard time with, because especially with the beans, because I'm really anxious to pick them and see what they look like. But if you pick them too soon, they might not be able to mature fully, and they might not be able to produce plant the following year. So another one, make sure the seeds are dry before storing, because there's a potential for mold or even premature sprouting. And then once you have your seeds gathered, you want to store them in a cool, dry place out of the sun, because, you know, if it's too warm and it's a little bit of moisture in there, you can have some sprouting or mold also. And then here's a huge one, is carefully label your seeds. You may think that you're going to remember what that seed is, but chances are you're going to look at that a year or two later and think, what in the world is this? And that's why it's really important to label your seeds, what year you picked them. Like if it's a bean, is it a pole bean? Is it a bush bean? All of that type of information that you want to have on there to be able to share with people. And bonus, one of the things that we're trying to do here in our community is to gather the stories of these seeds, so that when you share the seeds with the other people, that those seeds travel with those seeds, the stories travel with the seeds. So here's just a clip of our YouTube channel. So you can check that out. It's Ukwakhwa, Our Foods. And here's just a couple of screenshots of the videos about saving the seeds and having just some Indigenous seed etiquette. So if you're looking for Indigenous seeds, I think that this is a great place to start to learn how to ask other people for seeds. So here's just a picture of my husband and I, and this is our farmstead, Ukwakhwa, Niyukwayayathoslu. We have 10 acres and we grow a lot of our stuff here. And we also, pre-pandemic, it slowed down a bit during the pandemic, but we're hosting events here about planting, growing, harvesting, seed keeping, food preparation, food storage, making traditional tools and crafts and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm hoping with the pandemic slowing down that we'll be able to start up again and host all of these events again, to be able to share what we've been learning. So check us out on YouTube and also follow us on Instagram. We like to post all of our learning misadventures. And then finally, I'll leave you with this thought. This is my daughter planting squash seeds with the Three Sisters Garden. Every time an Indigenous person plants a seed, that is an act of resistance, an assertion of sovereignty, and a reclamation of identity. Yalanko.
Well, Wannon, and thank you so much for that powerful presentation. I loved your pictures, such beautiful seed pictures and food. And I loved what you said about the genius of Indigenous knowledge. So really grateful for you sharing the incredibly important work that you're doing. And a big thank you to all of our panelists for opening up with thinking about, you know, scale and how do we think about our food and economies within our communities to incorporate Indigenous knowledge. How does that translate into our healthcare settings, and then the work that's happening on the ground to preserve and protect the seeds in these food systems. So I really appreciate all that each of you had shared with us today. So at this time, we're going to welcome back all of our panelists because we'll have a bit of time here to take some questions from the audience. In fact, we did have a comment and a question come in during Whitney's presentation. The comment said, your activities and workshops sound great, and I can imagine effective in building education around diabetes and overall improved health and knowledge of traditions through community. Curious if the events you put on through the clinic require the participants and patients to sign a waiver to participate, or how that works?
Yeah, that's a good question. It definitely depends on what type of event we're holding. Some of the events, yeah, we do have a waiver, you know, to participate, especially more physical activity events where there's like a risk of, you know, falling or getting hurt or something. And yeah, we're able to work with we have a legal team here on the reservation, so we're able to work with them to help us come up with the wording for waivers and things like that. So it definitely depends on what kind of event we're holding.
Great, thank you, Whitney, and thank you for that question. We did have another question just come in through the chat, inquiring about those who are from outside of Wisconsin, just asking for some advice about how to acquire seeds, or what are some recommendations or approaches for going about that.
So for the seeds, in general, I just try to share them locally with the community. And there's a bit about a discussion about that in the video about Indigenous seed etiquette, about wanting to ensure that our seeds are primarily shared with our Indigenous relatives and also our non-Indigenous trusted allies. So we don't just kind of spread them around like that. So it's, but at the same time, there are other places like Seed Savers Exchange is a pretty good place to go to acquire some of our Indigenous seeds, that they've been good stewards to our seeds at times when we were not in a position to be able to grow them for ourselves, and they're rematriating some of those seeds to us. But so if you find other reputable places that do sell seeds, then that's another option.
Great question, and such important guidance about how do we respect the seeds and honor the approaches and ways that they are protected and shared. So thank you so much for that guidance. We had another question that came in, and this is to all of the panelists. How has your work been received by your community? So I'll turn it on over to you, Gary, first, if you wanted to respond.
Yeah, I think the tribe at one time had a what they called the community engagement workshop model, where luckily on a reservation, most of the agencies or entities on the reservation typically are controlled by the tribe, by the actual tribal council or tribal government, and we can bring those together and say, let's discuss some of the issues or problems here and how we treat those. So the idea of food as medicine has always been a concern, and getting people out. We know we went to processed sugar when originally maple syrup and maple sugar, you know, they have less of the fructose, the bad sugar, the bad parts of sugar. If any of that stuff in too big of quantities is not good though. But we had that, and we used to always have deer meat and bison and rabbit, all of those types of things that have a different type of lipid content than we have now with cows and cattle and as they move to dairy. So the tribe is saying, not only do we want you to move to this, to a type of organic, or what we call indigenous type, which is similar to organic, but we also want you to bring back much of our wild gathered foods. And the Great Lakes Indigenous Fish and Wildlife Commission has established a wild gathered foods code that we are reaching out to work with them. A lot of the elders are saying, hey, we want quality over quantity. This is what we were raised on. So they want in our schools, in our elderly center, our elderly feeding centers, or in some of the stores, they want that ability to get indigenous food, wild gathered foods. So this code can help bring that in, but they're saying, yes, let's do it. Let's move along. We did surveys, and the whole concept, and we're very envious of Oneida and some of the practices they and others have in putting together canneries or community kitchen type processing facilities to teach others in. So we've done those types of surveys, and we're in the process now of pulling that together, and we've received equipment for it, the stainless steel certified equipment for it. The community is backing us now in that development of a facility where people can do their own canning or entrepreneurs even can put out food that we know it's developed here and we want. I think a lot of what we are seeing, if I may finish this, is we saw the examples of the pandemic of the types of foods came, and many times, as good as they were, they didn't match what our communities really, really want. And we are trying to make those adjustments now. And this is for the human sickness. This is for the COVID-19. This is just a warm up, you know, and that is this is a warm up for climate change that is coming. So we better have our act together if we want to be a more independent type of community. And I say that even to the state of Wisconsin, we need to look at that. The whole supply chain is going to be thrown. We're seeing that now, even with some of the extremes. So yes, there's the tribal members, they're saying we need to be forward looking. More is coming forward as far as some of the sickness to the world with climate change. And the Department of Ag, you are part of that strategic solution to it. So yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that background and all the tremendous work that's happening. Next, I'm going to turn it on over to Whitney and Dr. Webster. If you can share your responses to the same question, how has your work been received by the community?
Yeah, I think overall, the work's been received pretty well. You know, we have the benefit of being able to host a lot of different types of events, and you know, the main goal of that is to try to just bring in all different types of people. Like our lacrosse series, that really brought in a group of like younger guys, especially, that we weren't always like capturing those young people coming to our events. So I think each of our events, we're seeing different groups of people, and overall people are interested in traditional foods and learning more about it. And we put out some surveys, you know, occasionally here and there too, to see what people are interested in. And there has been more interest in like how to grow foods and how to process them. So that's something we'd like to look into more in the future as well. Doing some workshops and like, yeah, processing wild game. And yeah, we have been distributing some of our traditional seeds as well. But like you were saying, Rebecca, you know, being mindful about the cross pollination and like where exactly we're growing these so that they aren't getting pollinated by these other types of corns. So, yeah.
So I think our community also has been really excited about the stuff that we're doing. We started our co-op, I think in 2015 or 16 or so, in response to corn shortages that the tribal government was growing. And people were just getting angry with the tribe for not growing enough corn. And then a bunch of us got together and said, hey, wait a minute. I don't think it's the government's responsibility to grow corn for our entire community. So that's when we stepped up and we said, look, we need to help out, spread this burden around and start to grow corn as a group. And then we were also growing corn at our home. And we also wanted to expand, and it feels like now there's tribal families popping up all over that are growing more and more of our foods to be able to make this a normal thing in our community. And it's pretty exciting to see that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for responding. That was a really great question. And I want to be respectful of time. I know that our organizers said we needed to do a hard stop at 1:10. So I just wanted to share some closing remarks as we wrap up. Again, I just want to say a wawan and kitanin to all of you for sharing with us today about the extremely important work that you're doing. And I can also appreciate that it's difficult to talk about such large topics like Indigenous knowledge and the awesome initiatives you're working on in such a short period of time. But I do have tremendous respect for all that you have done to learn and to practice and continue on these important and sacred teachings and honoring these ways of life. And also highlighting how these teachings are key to overall health and well-being. Each of you talked about this, food is medicine, and you highlighted how important food security is, and what we eat is extremely important to who we are and how we heal. So I wish each of you the very best in your continued efforts and greatly appreciate all that you do. I'm humbled to have shared space with all of you today. So as we all leave, I wanted to challenge us to think about the ways that we can respect, support, and honor traditional knowledge and the important efforts that we learned about. I also want to say a wawanan and thank you to our audience for joining us. And I invite you all to share your thanks and appreciation for our panelists in the chat. I believe up next on the agenda is the networking session, which I believe the link has already been posted in the chat. But on that note, I turn it on over to the host if there's anything else that needs to be shared with you all. But again, just thank you for joining us for this session. Wawanan.